Welcome to the Raising Empowered Kids interview series. Today, you're in for a real treat with Katherine Dean. Katherine is known as the financial empowerment woman because her experience in the financial industry has helped hundreds of business owners, entrepreneurs, individuals, couples, and women create their path to wealth. Her approach to wealth is not just about money, it's also about mindset, family legacy, and what matters most to her clients. She's the founder of Living Your Worth Inc., has her MBA, and is a certified financial planner. Katherine volunteers her time with young girls to own their independence and power for an incredible future as a Girl Scout leader and serving on the board of Girls Inc. Hi, Katherine. I'm so glad to have you here with us today on the Raising Empowered Kids Summit. So, can you tell us a little bit how you got started in the world of financial empowerment and helping families with their finances?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, I grew up in a household where my parents were very entrepreneurial, but they never really talked about the steps or the process on getting to that stage, or also owning some investment properties and having passive income. We talked about a lot about business around the table, but never the steps on how they got there or the struggles along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So right there is one, there was a lot of conversation around our table about it. So I had some knowledge, but then I grew up, I went to college. Like everybody that goes to college, you have some sort of debt, and I was working through college as well. And then I came out, went into the real world, and with a maxed out credit card, and showed up in the work environment, not really for owning my expertise that I went to college. I was grossly underpaid for numerous years. And then up until about 8.5 years ago, I thought things were going great, and I was married and two young kids. And I literally went out for date night and was told we need a break, and fast forward into a very tumultuous divorce because of children involved and finances and all of that, and fell on my rear end financially. I had been in the business about 12 to 13 years, which is kind of interesting because I was already helping people in the wealth management side of things, and I wasn't taking any of my own advice. I was front loading a lot of retirement money for my ex. I had, to be completely vulnerable, a deed in both of our names, a mortgage in my name. All the things that I would not tell my daughters to do. I'm a Girl Scout leader. I'm on the board of Girls Inc. of Long Island. All the things that I would never, ever, ever tell anybody to do, I was like my worst case study. So really, that's where I decided, after getting through a divorce and getting my life back together again, I decided about 4 years after my divorce to start a company called Living Your Worth Inc. And I speak around the country. I speak to parents, I speak to young girls, I speak to corporations, because empowering your employees financially also helps, for people to stay and retained as employees, because I feel as though they're making great financial decisions in their lives. And they don't worry about it so much. A lot of people, there's a ton of statistics that say that people idle at work, which really isn't idling. They're stressed or thinking about money all the time. So I just am spreading this message of financial empowerment and showing up, owning your worth. There's a huge pay gap. We're going to get into so much today. I'm so excited about this. But yeah, from my own story is really where a lot of my transformation happened. And I said, oh my God. And I'm not the only one that has gone through this, right? And then started to talk to people, and they said, you know what, you should really start a business around this. Like, you have so much knowledge base, and you really enjoy working and seeing people thrive. And maybe if you started that would, help a lot more people versus just one-on-one. And that's kind of where it took off from there. It was one of those, let's do it as a charitable thing that turned into a business,
Awesome.
Heart-centered.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can tell that it's something that you enjoy too. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's so wonderful to be able to, earn income doing something that you love and something that comes from the heart. And that you're helping other people too. So, it's really a win-win-win. So,
Yeah. And when you're, you know what it is, when everything in your life comes into alignment, I believe in energy, and I believe in what your purpose is in life. And when you start to thrive on what fulfills you, but then also everybody I work with, I have some sort of, little transformation as I'm working with them. And once you start to do that and have all that alignment in your life, it's like everything else kind of opens up or is easy. It's like life isn't always butting up against something. When I talked a little bit about that, I wasn't showing up in the workplace for my worth. I was killing myself. I was like killing myself, long hours, working really hard, managing big departments, always continually working on myself, getting the next degree, all these different things, right? But I never owned my expertise or who I was, so I was grossly underpaid. When I started to realize that or accept it and then think, well, what do I want to be making, right? So I went to what in New York, I live in New York, which a mediocre salary, I hate to say it, is $50,000. Our taxes alone are over $10,000 a year. And that's what I was making to now a multiple six-figure income. All of that did not happen overnight, but what happened was I started to get my financial path in place. And I think once that starts to happen, then you can also be a role model for your children, and you can be, you can have better conversations about money. My household I grew up with was, every time I would ask for something, I was the youngest of three. Every time I would ask, it was like an instant no. It was like, no, we can't afford that. No, we can't do that. No, 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 no. And I actually, like, how I started to approach it with my children was, like we would talk about, let's say, going on vacation, or one of our big things next year is the Women's World Cup. We're all huge soccer fans. It's in France. And that was our big vacation we want to take next year. And I said, that's great. This is what we have to do to get there. Like, we can't be going out to dinner all summer long, or maybe we can't, but what the difference, and I want to share the difference in how I grew up, was we actually discussed it around the dining room table. Like, okay, so where do you guys want to go? Like, we usually do a big vacation every year as a family. Where do you guys want to go? And then it's, okay, how much do we think it's going to be? This is how long we're going to be staying. And we really back out. Like, let's look at, where we can stay at an Airbnb versus a really expensive hotel. And it's amazing when your kids start getting involved in the conversation, they start to actually understand money, and money as a tool, and not as like this scarcity or abundance. Like, they just get, okay, money's a form of exchange. Okay, great. So how are we going to accomplish that? Versus I've always felt like I was being made wrong for asking for something when I was growing up, and I'd always be told no. And that was, of course, as a parent, what did I start doing, right? As soon as there was a conversation, I instantly saw my father and myself when I would be like, well, no, we can't afford that right now. Or no, that's not the priority right now. And I started to shift the mindset of, I know how long it took me to get out of that mindset. How do I shift that for my kids? So I know I went on and on here, but there's so many facets to the money conversation.
oh my goodness, it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
you hit on so many. My mind here is just going, oh yeah, and then, like we could talk about like the scarcity mindset, and like how parents, you're forming like what your kids think about, how their relationship with money. And so, like, your relationship with money is going to be different from your kids. Of course, we all have unique relationships anyway, but like where you grew up having like that whole like scarcity, like, oh, we can't afford it, this and that, versus you're sitting down with your kids and saying, okay, well, we want to do this. So how can we afford this? How can we make this happen for our family? And so it's a completely different mindset there. And it's just amazing. And one of the other things I was thinking too was, as we're, kids, oh, I kind of lost that train of thought, but that's okay. There's so much here that we can talk about. It'll come back to me and we'll hit on it later. But yeah, so what it was that we just really don't really teach our kids very much about money. Like, there's nothing about it really in school unless you take an accounting class, unless your parent teaches you like how to balance your checkbook. It's like maybe you learn a little bit about saving when if you get your allowance or like money from, birthday or something like that. But how can we like educate our kids more about money?
Interesting. I love what you're talking about right now because that when you talk about, first off, you said something very interesting that I want to touch on is our children learn our money habits. So, and they learn them and they become so habitual that in order to get out of it, they actually have to recognize it. So I call them your financial archetypes. That's part of something that I teach my clients, and I teach people in my programs, that you inherently have as you grow up a financial archetype. How is it good, bad, and different? And how can you utilize that to your advantage and also accept where you're at, right?
Right.
So that's the thing I wanted to touch on was we definitely all, I'm married to somebody whose father was a young child in the Depression. So can you imagine, like I'm entrepreneurial and I married somebody who thinks, at first I remember it was like, don't use, this is insane. So I got remarried, and I remember thinking before we got married, wait a second, more than 4 pieces of toilet paper. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, there's all females in the house. Like, I don't understand. So that was something that inherently I was never taught, like, oh, 4 pieces of toilet paper. And you don't realize how ingrained the conversation about scarcity and abundance comes into play. So the first thing is really, as an adult, is if you have a negative thoughts, positive thoughts, whatever your thoughts are with money, just recognize them. There's nothing wrong with them either way. It's just understand that that is how you grew up most likely. And we weren't taught much in school. The first thing at college they give you, or at least when I went to college, was a credit card. It had $200 max. And I think it was within 2 weeks I was maxed out. I can remember I called my mom. I was like, well, I had a credit card and now it's maxed out. Well, guess what? My credit card was mailed home. My bill was paid and that was it. It was like, well, that's not happening anymore. But nobody ever taught me about credit card ratings, right? Like, about credit score ratings. It was one of those things that I learned from out of default of screwing up and figuring it out. So in order to educate your children, you have to be also educated on how to manage money and finances in your household. And nobody loves that horrific B word, which I like to say it's like the bad B word, the budgeting word. But it is necessary to know what's coming in, what's going out. Remember, we all have choice. We all have choice to either pay a ton of money for, let's say, a TV subscription, or we may use such things as like a Netflix or a Hulu. Like, people just have different choices. And it all comes down to choice, but we also first need to be educated. And if there's something that's resonating with you right now that I'm saying, it might be that you just need to get into a program for a 6-month program, a year program, really just to understand how money works. And, if you're looking to retire eventually, you might want to put some money away in retirement. If you're looking to purchase a house, you might want to have a goal fund account, all these different things. And you can do the same for your children. So you can sit down, you can show them a budget. You can say, well, you don't need to tell them exact numbers if you're uncomfortable with it at first, but you can say, this is what's coming in, this is what's going out. And let's say we have $200 a month in play money. How are we going to spend that? Let's make a family decision about that. And I find it really important because then children start to think like, oh, is it worth it? Do I want it? Or is it something I really want? Or is it a need? Or is it, and they start to actually think about it. So when they grow up, they understand how money works. Like, oh, well, you might make $100,000 a year, but once taxes are taken out and all of that comes down to it, let's say it's 50,000, or even if it's 60,000, then you go and pay, and wait a second, there's tax on clothing, or there's tax on items that I purchased. Wait, so now my dollar isn't actually worth more. And I know I may make it sound complicated now, but these are all the tools and resources that we should all have in our back pocket so that we can make the right choices. And then we can then in turn teach our children this system, because it also comes down to your value system, right? And they get to make those choices, which is really neat. Like, they get to be involved in simple conversations about what those choices are. Now, my mother is very old school. Like, she says that our children run our lives now. That's her way of thinking. So again, she's up there in her 70s, and she does think she has a totally different mindset than what I have. She grew up in a totally different era than I grew up in. Um, I don't allow my children to run my finances. So to be clear, I allow them a little portion so that they can be involved in the conversation about what that little portion can do. Do we go to a matinee in our town, which is incredible? It's $5 for a matinee. So if 4 of us go, that's $20 versus going to an evening show that might be $12, $13, $14. And then, we could utilize those extra funds towards something else. It just allows them to start understanding the ebb and flow of money and making, choices that are okay with them too. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a really valuable lesson as they start to grow older. Maybe even they sell this thing. I wish I had it does save, spend, and donate. So that, and it's like portioned out. So even when they get, let's say, a check for their birthday, or if they do have an allowance, that they have to allocate funds a certain way. And it also gets them in the habit when they get older, right? So, because again, unless you take an economics course, coming out of high school, I knew nothing about balancing a checkbook. I knew nothing about finances. My undergrad was marine biology, if you can believe it. That's what I went to school for. So I really, until I went for my master's, my MBA, did I actually realize that like I could have control of funds, and start to get money working for me instead of working so darn hard for my money. Right. So that's a long-winded explanation, but I gave a ton of tips and tools in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I wanted to share as much what was, just going through the process of how I actually work with my children,
Mm-hmm.
And how I allow them a little leeway so that they can make choices that work best for them and the family, pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much to know too. I mean, like, not only is just like there's the basic take care of your own money, balance your checkbook, keep your credit score healthy, all these types of things. But then there's things like the stock market. Then there's things like if you like say buy and sell a house, like I know a friend of mine sold a rental property and didn't know anything about capital gains until it came time for tax time. And oops.
Yeah.
And so like there's just, there's so much for people to learn. And even as adults, like there's a lot of things that we miss along the way, like my friend, that was a pretty hefty tax bill to miss, it's like sometimes, having that conversation with your accountant is really worth it. But yeah, so it's really true that there's a lot to learn and we don't get good education. So what other things can, parents do to help prepare their kids for being financially, independent, responsible, and make money work for them instead of have to chase dollars all the time?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Chase dollars. Don't you feel like, I feel like somebody's like trying to catch them in the air as they're running when you say that. Yeah, for sure. So they could always open a very simple, like a savings checking account or a savings account. Let's just start basic. They can put some money in there. What most credit unions and banks have some sort of savings account with some interest bearing for children under the age of 18. And that's always a good way to start because they can see, let's say they put in $100, but then at the end of the month they have $101. So they see that their money is growing, but they're actually not putting more money in. It's a great way to see, is that free money? How am I making money? So that's a really valuable lesson. Another way would be that even if they had a mock, and I like to say mock, just so that they can play around portfolio. There's so many different websites that you can start. You can start some type of mock portfolio where they could, Yahoo Finance, and they could say, oh, well, I really love Facebook and I really love Amazon and I love all these companies. And they have a set budget, let's say $10,000, and they invest a little bit in each. As a mock portfolio, and just to see how the fluctuation goes, or see, they might put $10,000 in and it might be at 9,500 at one day, and then the next day it might be 10,200, but they can see how things start to move and understand that there is a little bit of risk in that. That's always a fun way to play. And you guys, as a family, you could even track something like that.
Hmm.
And then eventually they could start putting some funds away for themselves. 529 plans are always great. You can always show them that, if you're putting $100 away in a 529, what it's invested in. Usually it's some type of target date portfolio, what's invested in and how that's doing. So there are different ways to play the game with your kids, and get them involved in the conversation, allow them to ask questions. Remember, we're not always going to know the answers, but that doesn't mean because we're older or because we're the parents doesn't mean, listen, I don't have an answer for that, but why don't we look it up together? Why don't we figure out how that works? You could always talk about, mortgages, right? I mean, mortgage, if you have a mortgage and you look on your mortgage statement, it always shows what the principal balance is. It shows what you're paying towards the actual principal, what's going towards interest, and they can see that as well. For me, $1,000 in interest a month, it's like, oh my God, $1,000 in interest. But if I started saving when I was really young and got a really big down payment and I put that down, I wouldn't be paying all that interest, right? So they're all different ways to start the conversation. Like I was talking about that I do financial literacy, but I also do it for my Girl Scout troop. And we talk about fundraising and things like that. And most recently, over the weekend, a few of the girls did a fundraising initiative, and they had made these bracelets. They were really pretty. It was down near I live close to the water, so it was near the water, and it was during a seafood festival. And they just thought the bracelets, when they were done, oh, $2 a piece. And I said, okay, let's write down all the total of the supplies, how many bracelets were made. Like I really went through like, what is the total, cost of goods? Like, let's figure out how to make it. And they're like, oh, we're going to make some money. I said, wait, you didn't put labor in there. Let's put in how many hours and figure out a guesstimate of what the labor was, and added that all up. And I said, see, if you did $2 a bracelet, you're losing like $150.
Right.
And so I said, okay, so what would be a break even? And I actually broke it down for them. Okay, break even would be about $3.50. So how about $5? Because then the $1.50, difference is the actual amount overall that would be going to the charity that we're fundraising for right now.
Right.
So I allow them, to think on their own and figure it out first. And then I'm like, okay, nothing wrong with that, but let me show you how the numbers actually break out.
Hmm.
And it also allows me to kind of keep in my conversation, like, okay, does this actually make sense? Like $2 sounded great, but then when we backed it out and figured it out, it was like, no, it actually is about $3.50 a bracelet. Let's figure out how much we can charge. So
Right.
it's making it fun. Money doesn't always have to be like this, like the elephant in the room. I hate to say it that way, but I'm a female and I talk about money.
Hmm.
And normally you don't come across that, right? But if you talked to me 8 years ago, going through a divorce, having debt, not affording my house, almost losing my house, barely putting food on the table, I probably would have I would have been like this, nope, that's not what I do for a living, because I was terrified. I was terrified of where my life was going to go, and really the failure of it, right? And the first thing I had to do was accept where I was. Once I accepted, it was like, okay, now how do we get out of it?
Right.
But
And
if I kept in the inertia of not accepting it, I would have probably not been where I'm at now, and my trajectory for the next year would never have been where I'm at now.
sure. And do you
Yeah.
find that a lot of women are, and I think the answer to this is yes, but a lot of women are kind of in the situation that you were in, like they're not necessarily up on, what's going on financially, especially like within a relationship. Like I think there's something cultural around that. Could you talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Yes. The interesting part is I do find a lot of women when I work with them or they come to my events, they pay the bills, right? But they're not making a lot of financial decisions. So in one aspect of it, they're involved, but then in another aspect of it, they're not.
Hmm.
And women manage over 60% of the wealth in the United States, which is really a huge percentage as compared to how much knowledge we have about it. And I see it in the wealth management side. I see where spouses come in, or the lack of the wife that comes in, if that makes sense. So usually the wife isn't involved in a lot of the decisions, like the retirement decisions, investment decisions, big purchase decisions, or maybe their opinion I don't want to say doesn't matter, but it's not as forefront. And also in the work environment, we tend to not step up to the plate when we see a promotion is there. We want to know everything. Men will apply for a job when they know 40% of something. We need to know like 90 to 100%. I'm guilty of that, so I understand it. Rarely do we speak up for our worth, and we don't step into our worth and ask for the salary that is aligned with our expertise, or even our tenure at a firm or at an employer. So these are different things that definitely come up. And lastly, if you own a business, if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, we rarely do we charge the prices for our expertise or for our tenure in what we do. And that's really interesting because we're not being aligned. We are uncomfortable asking for it, but we're so heart-centered that we want to be out there more with people, right? And we want to have more trajectory and have more clients and more spread and more, communication about what we do, but we hold ourselves back. So that becomes kind of interesting. I had a conversation with somebody this morning. We were talking about in the nonprofit space about some stuff. And she said to me that there was somebody in her CPA firm that was up for a partner. And she walked away from the position because she thought they were only making her a partner because she was a female, not because of her expertise. And that really, it almost, I said, oh my goodness, I wish I had known her at the time, because it was almost like she was uncomfortable knowing that she succeeded, right? She wasn't stepping into her greatness or her power. And that's really where that pay gap and the financial inequality really comes into play, is when we don't step into that and own that and really are comfortable with the conversation. Negotiating for success is not an easy conversation, but it can be had, and you can practice that. You can be uncomfortable at first, but it does become easier as you start to work with somebody and have that conversation over and over and over again. So yeah, boy, did I go all over the place. Pay gap between like 50 cents to 80 cents on the dollar still. This is insanity. It's insane to me. It's really insane.
Yeah, it's an issue. So are
Yeah.
there things that we can do, like, to help prime our kids, like our daughters in particular, to, step up and take that initiative, or, go for that job or ask for what they're worth? Are there like tools or strategies or things that parents can do to help kind of foster that in their kids, so that when they're out in the workforce, they can,
Always my first thing is to lead by example. That's probably number one, is if your kids, especially daughters, see you showing up a certain way. And, I have one daughter who is very quiet and introverted, and I have another daughter who I swear she's just going to take on the world, and she's a spitfire. And however, when we have conversations about things, I ask them, I want to know their feedback. Like, if you were to go for this, or did you ever think about starting a company? And have those conversations, because it's not just for the people showing up where they are dictated their salary, right? It's okay. So you're stepping into the workforce. You know that you can do X, Y, and Z. Make sure you negotiate. HR, by the way, and I've been on both sides of it. I, have been on the negotiating side with HR, and I've also been on the request side for HR. They expect you to go back 2 to 3 times. They don't expect you to take the first offer. So, they built in, when they offer here, when the salary can actually go up to here. So when you go back and ask for a little more, they'll come down a little bit, like, they'll kind of start to meet you, but they expect that you're going to come back and that you're going to ask for more than they offered you. That's just where, they always lowball initially. And unfortunately, a lot of women, they accept the first offer. Like, oh, they want me, versus, listen, that's great that you want me, but I know I'm worth $10,000 more. I know I'm worth 10% more than you're offering. And, I'd love to take the job, but if you could offer me this plus benefits and all of that kind of stuff. And you can, because this goes for people talking to their kids, you can negotiate time off, you can negotiate perks, you can negotiate benefits. There's so many different things you can negotiate when you get into the workforce or when you're switching jobs in the workforce. And our daughters need to know this, our children need to know this, that they don't, you don't just go in and say, yes, I'll take the first job offer. Yeah, you might want that job, you might be so excited, it might be your number one top pick, but they're not going to say, I'm sorry, we don't need your services, if you go back and negotiate and they say there's no wiggle room. Like, they're not going to say, I'm sorry, it's off the offer's off the table. Or what they'll say is, yes, we can negotiate, or they'll tell you that that's the best they could do right now, and they'll look into it in 6 months. Or you can even say, let's get that on the calendar. Like, okay, great, I'm going to accept the job, but no, in 3 to 6 months, we're going to negotiate my salary from there. Because then you have some time to prove yourself also, if they're not willing to negotiate. But there's always ways to negotiate, because it's not just about income all the time, right?
Right.
It could also be about benefits. It could be about time off. Especially, I know a lot of millennials right now, they're more about experiences and they want the time. They might want 4 weeks vacation versus a 10% bump in salary initially, where instead of getting 2 weeks, there's different ways to negotiate out there. And our children need to understand that, and also see that we're a role model for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and share with it too. Like, talk about things like, going in there and like being in the boss's office and how you felt, and like what happened, and or like we were talking about with the mortgage statement, like show the kids what you're paying for the house. It's like, it's maybe something they should know anyway. I mean, eventually maybe they'll inherit it from you, or who knows what, but it's all part of like that ongoing and that open conversation, which I think helps to build trust and, that whole family unit too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And allow your children to ask questions, and don't make them wrong for asking questions. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a key. I think, and we're parents, right? We're busy all the time. Sometimes we just don't have the wherewithal, but then table it. Say, you know what? Why don't we talk about that tomorrow? Why don't we talk about that over dinner? Like, for us, Friday night it's usually pizza night. We make our own pizzas. We sit down. We usually play games and stuff. My kids are still pretty young. They're almost 10 and 12. They're on the cusp right now. So we're getting into our birthday month. But just allow them to be open with you. I think that's in any conversation. I don't know, you're going to have a lot of experts on here that are talking about that parental guidance and everything. I'm sure most people are going to say, if you keep that channel open, they're going to be open about many other things in life. It's not just going to be about the conversation we're talking about today.
Exactly. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So I'm really curious about like the money archetypes. Could you tell us a little bit about them?
I can. So I have, I wish I could show you, but it's a wheel and it shows all different financial archetypes. So I can give you an example. I'm going to give myself as an example. When I was in my early 20s, I was definitely a spendthrift. I thought I had to have the nice car. Not that nice cars aren't, listen, if that's your thing, that's cool. But for me, before kids, I had to have the nice expensive car. I had to have all the top name brand purses, shoes, and all of that. And I spent a fortune versus putting money away for myself. So that's an archetype of spendthrift. But the problem with me, and also with spendthrift, is you buy things to make yourself feel good. It's almost like you're buying things for love. And a week later, when the credit card bill comes, 2 weeks later, when the credit card bill comes, it might be 2 days later, you have that buyer's remorse. That's really what a spendthrift archetype is. I am married to a saver. A saver is, it's almost like a squirrel getting ready for the winter. That's probably the best way. Like, you're squirreling away lots and lots of money in a savings account because you just think like doomsday is coming and you're not sure when that's going to happen. And you're a little nervous about getting some money working for you. And how do I do that? And how do I play with that? That's really a saver. Now, savers can be extremely powerful too. And I'll talk about spendthrift also. Savers can be extremely powerful, where they save enough, and then all of a sudden they're like, that's great, I saved enough for a down payment on an investment property, right? So a saver, but on the other, so there's two, I always say there's like a yin and yang to my archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
there's a yin and yang, meaning a saver could just have a boatload of money in the bank that's making literally, there's hardly any interest right now. So you're making hardly any interest right now on your money, and it's just sitting there not doing anything for you. So that's a saver archetype. A spendthrift can also be one of your most generous friends, right? So there's a lot of redeeming qualities with a spendthrift. They're ready, to participate. They probably go to a lot of the charitable events. They give a lot, and they're very heart-centered, where that's why when they buy something, it fulfills their heart. And once I had kids, my priorities shifted. So that's why I got rid of that whole spendthrift idea and started to think about what I call it's a hero. It's how do I make more passive income? I don't have to work so hard for my money. So I shifted a lot. It took a little bit, plus going through a divorce. How do I get it so I never ever have that financial rug ripped out from underneath me? And that's really where I try to get my clients to, is how to set yourself up so you don't have that financial stress, that financial anxiety anymore, that, the sleepless nights. How do we get you out of that into my money's working for me? I have a plan. It's in process. I don't have to think anymore about it. It's just on automatic.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of my archetypes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, let's talk a little bit about ways to get passive income. Can you tell us what passive income is and how do you get it?
Sure. So passive
And
income.
also, is that something we can put up for our kids too?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Passive income you can get from, let's say, dividend stocks. So you have a portfolio and you buy some stocks that give you dividends, and you can collect that income off the dividends every quarter, every month, depending on what you're looking for. And that money makes money for you. So the best person to actually think about passive income is Warren Buffett. He's a great example of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he invests in companies. The companies pay dividends. He lives off that income, or he takes all that money and he reinvests it into more investments, right? That's one way. If you're a business owner, you can always have some sort of partnership with somebody where there's a referral source coming back and forth. That's another way to have passive income. So I'm, in the financial realm, I work with CPAs. There is a symbiotic relationship that goes back and forth between us. That's a way to make some passive income where you're not really working so hard for it. The whole key to passive income is you're not working your buns off to make the money, right? It's not your job. It's actually the job of the money to be making for you. So you might start the month and have $2,000 of income coming in that you're not working for. That would be great passive income, right? So real estate, another great way to have passive income. And when you said about our kids, I invest with somebody else. Mm-hmm. Our company is the initials of all of our children. There's 5 children in total. The idea is that over time and multiple properties later, all of this income, as we ride off into the sunset, will be passive income for our heirs going forward. It also is great because it also takes a lot of the burden off of you on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. to be able to make that extra money, right? And if you don't need the money right away, you can just keep putting that money back into itself to make more money for you. So if you have real estate, and let's say you have $1,000 a month that is on top of your mortgage and expenses and everything that's coming in, so that would be some type of income coming in, you could put that money and automatically put it into the savings account and have that building for the next property, which is exactly how we do it. So that is, those are different ways to have passive income. Blogging, if we have a lot of people on here that are bloggers and you get sponsorships and all of that, that's money coming into you to run your business that you actually really aren't earning per se, because you're still doing the blog anyway. You're still out there doing stuff anyway, and these people are sponsoring your program or your blog or whatever that is, your podcast. It could be multitude of different things, and that is money coming in that helps you afford to run your business. So there's so many different ways. It's just a matter of picking one and sticking with it for a little while, right, getting that under your belt, and then moving on to the next thing, because if you sometimes are like me with shiny object syndrome, you can be like, oh, I'm going to start here. Nope, I'm going to do this. Nope, I'm going to do that. And then 10 years later, you're going, oh crap, I have no passive income. So
Or,
yeah, so
or
just
you're
stick with
too
something.
diversified to
Yes,
really,
yes.
you're so spread thin that it doesn't really.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, so just pick one that you're comfortable with, that is aligned with your risk and who you are as a person and your value system and all of that, and start there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what about, like, say, for example, like when you were telling us, you ran into a problem with your credit card, with your first credit card and that kind of thing. What
Yeah.
can parents do to help prepare like their kids for going out on their own, like going to college, where they're starting to get inundated with credit card offers and like these different things?
Okay, cool. Well, one thing, if you're able to, is to help your children actually build their credit um, from the time that they can get a credit card, or they can be joint on a credit card but have a limit, right? So we never want to be joint on a credit card with a $30,000 limit and they have access to that. That would definitely not be the way to go. But you might want to give them, let's say, a gas card, right? So
Mhm.
when they go to college, they have a limit on there because, and they go to use it and they have, let's say, a limit of $100. And so that starts to build their credit as long as it's paid off every month, right? That's something that we want to teach them. We also want to teach them that if they buy something that's $100 and they don't pay it back and they have, let's say, a 19% interest rate, which is not unheard of,
Yeah.
that product is literally going to cost them double or more over the course of the time that they pay it back. So if they purchase something for 100 and only pay 20, and then they get that interest charged on there, and then it continues on, it really shows like, well, was that $100 item, let's say, worth $300, or was that $100 item worth like waiting an extra month till you could afford it to pay $100 and not waste all this extra money? So it's similar to that mortgage, showing them a mortgage statement, how that works. It's very similar, showing them how compounding works, because it works in reverse too. It works either for or against us.
Hmm.
So we can either have money that's compounding for us, which is incredible. It's the fact that I can put $100 in the bank and within a few years, or in a stock, or anything like that, within a few years it can double itself, blows my mind. But how quickly we can put $100 on a credit card that turns into $300, and all of a sudden we're out that money, right? So they need to understand how it works both ways. But you
Hmm.
can definitely get a credit card, some type of small limit credit card, where you speak to the credit card company, you allow them not to go over anything, or they have notifications. You can get the email notification when the limit is getting to a certain point, and just have that conversation. It doesn't need to be an argument. It could just be, listen, you're getting close to the max on that. Did you realize that? And it makes them become aware of it and make right choices for them, and make right choices so that it works for both of you too, right? So, but that's also a great way, because you do want your kids building credit. I mean, you can't buy a house, you can't buy a car. Like, there's so many different things that you can't have access to without building a really great credit score. So you definitely want to think about that
And
also.
they actually they penalize you too if you don't have any kind of credit rating, or if you have a bad credit score, like your insurance costs more. It might be hard to get an apartment. You know,
Yep.
maybe it might be harder to get like a cell phone. I mean, there's just all kinds of things where they're checking your credit score, and if you have no credit, that's kind of the same as having bad credit. Like, they don't really want to engage with you unless you have some kind of history. So I love your suggestion about the credit, the gas card. That's a good way. It's like exactly where that money's going. It's going in their gas tank. It's like that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, so that's awesome. Cool.
Yeah. Cool.
um so, like, what can you like do to help kids to like encourage them to think about and save for long term? Because I know it's a lot of kids are like, oh, I see this, I want that, and some of them will save and that kind of thing, but like you know but also like thinking for like the long term, because like I know a lot of us, we're not saving for retirement. If we had started when we were 20 and first started working, teenager first started working, we'd all be set for retirement. But for
Yeah.
a lot of us, that is not the case. So
What do you think about that?
Well, let me tell you how I did, for me, what happened when I grew up. And a lot of my clients and who we're talking to right now is, I had a job. I worked my butt off in high school. Always had a job. I've been working since I was 12. So I babysat, which was cash, by the way, right? At the time it was cash.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time grew on, like went on, then I was filing tax returns before I was 18, like all these different things. Great. But you know what my parents never told me? To take 25% of that and put it away for myself. Because, and I'm not, there's no blame here because like you and I having this conversation, I never thought about it before I had kids. Like, what would I do? Right. So my plan is this is my plan for my kids and what I talk a lot with my clients about because they want an easier future for their kids. I think that's what we all want, is just to ask them to set aside 25% of whatever they make and start putting that away. If it's a savings account right now, okay, good, but it gets them in the habit. See, all of this comes down to your habits in life, right? And if your habit is, well, when I work, I automatically put 25% away from a very early age. Can you imagine at 40 years old where your children would be if they got in that habit? If 25% is too much, 10%. Let's just start at 10%. And there are a lot of financial calculators online where you can show them if you put away, let's say, $1,200 a year now, you put it into some sort of mutual fund, an investment account, a target date fund, whatever you want to, there's so many different things out there. Everybody has different tolerances. But if you started to put that away now, what it would turn into by the time you're 30, by the time you're 40 years old, just $1,200 a year, what that would do for you and how you'd be set for retirement. And hold that, like, be like, this is what I didn't do. This is what I would have done. Are those pair of shoes that, for me, was that purse that cost $500? Like, I don't even know what I spent my money on. Now I'm like, I don't even know, 20 years ago, God only knows where that money went.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the conversations. And I think being in that conversation and saying, listen, let's look at it every year. Let's talk about it. Come see my CPA. Like, let's talk about it. Let's sit down with our financial advisor. Let's go through this. Let's get comfortable with it. Come see how we're doing it and open up that conversation, because your kids also should kind of have an idea of what you're doing. And if you're embarrassed by what you're doing, it's okay. Then start to shift a little bit and say, this is what I'm looking to do. How about we all have this conversation, right? Kids are way smarter than sometimes we give them credit for. Sometimes, like, what comes out of my children's mouths, I'm like, wait a second, did I tell them that? No. Where did they learn that? So they are, and they're sponges. So if let's say you're either a single parent, I've been there, I've done that, I know what that's like. If you're married, I've done that in a bad sense and in a good sense. And if you argue about money in front of your kids, that is probably not the right example. So,
Right.
and it might just be that your spouse and you need to have somebody, a go-between, that get you guys on the same page financially. You don't have to agree on everything, but sometimes even the thought that I can have a financial goal is like amazing to some people, right? Because they're just so on the grind every day, like just grinding that they never take the time to actually think that they can have goals. And guess what? Our kids have goals. Our kids have, they say a huge world, they see like this huge opportunity of a world out there. And if we're only on the grind every day, they're never going to see the opportunity to put money away from themselves to, for the future, 20 years down the line. It comes quick. We all know that as you get older, but they don't see it that way. And if we're not looking at it that way, they're not going to look at it that way. So we need to start being in that conversation and seeing our future in a different light too. It all leads by example. I know my actions speak so much louder than words in my house. I can tell if I'm in an aggravated mood, it's like the energy in the house shifts. If I'm in a playful mood and my spouse is in a playful mood, then the whole energy shifts, even the dogs. So I know it sounds kind of funny, but guess what? Your kids also feel that wonky energy with money, or they're like, ooh, mom, dad, everybody's having a great day with money, they feel that, and they see, but they learn by example. So I think just start shifting that mindset and that energy around that money's just a tool, right? We all need it. It's a form of exchange. It's not, it's not going to go away anytime soon that I know about. Bitcoin was really great until Bitcoin wasn't really great, and it, fluctuates all over the place. So let's just be okay with it. Let's just be comfortable with it. It's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Some people say necessary evil. I just say it's a tool,
It's
you
a
know.
tool. It
It's,
really is. And I think
yeah.
I think it's really helpful to look at it that way. It's like it's not good, it's not bad. It's all what you get to choose to do with it. And there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. If you make a lot of money, you can give a lot of it away. It's like, and you can do
Yeah.
a lot of good things with it. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it's really a tool. And so I'm really grateful for you for sharing all these wonderful tools and thoughts and insights with us today.
Thank you for having me. I gave a ton of information. I hope I didn't overwhelm everybody, but
I think it's
yeah.
great. I think you gave a really well-rounded, view of, the financial, what's going on, financially, and the ways that we can help support our kids and move forward. And I know that you have a couple things that you want to share with our viewers. Could you tell us a little bit about your free gift?
Yes, so I would love to offer my roadmap, which is really simple, wealth2freedomroadmap.com. You can go there, you can get my 7 simple steps to literally go from wealth creator distress to wealth creator success. And that's free. You'll get that right to your inbox. And then I have a really cool gift. Are we talking about this gift yet?
Yeah, so I
Okay.
will put the link to the free
Awesome.
gift on the website, and then as part of the upgrade package for people who want to upgrade and get copies of the recordings to download and that kind of thing, we also, some of our speakers have donated some other goodies. And can you tell
Yes,
us
yes.
more?
So I have a program called wealth2freedomformula.com. That's like it's there. The first module, which we talked about a little bit today, your financial archetype,
Mhm.
and allowing yourself to start thinking outside of where you're at now and the opportunity for the future, not what's happened in the past. I am giving away that first module, which is part of a $997 program. So you're literally getting it when you upgrade with this program. So I am really excited. You get the entire recording. It's a whole hour, and modules included in there. It goes through really your first step to completely transforming your relationship with money, because we definitely have a relationship with money. And that is what is, so I would highly, highly recommend that you upgrade your package so that you can get all these incredible free gifts, because this is the first time I've done that. So thank you for asking me to offer that, because I
Oh,
think
thank
it's
you.
great.
Thank you
It's
for
great.
being so generous and
Yeah,
sharing it
yeah.
with us. I'm really excited to, you know,
Awesome.
make it available to people and be able to check it out. So cool.
Terrific, terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks everybody, and we will catch you next time. I want to thank you for joining us today. And tomorrow I have an extra special surprise coming up for you. We have a few extra speakers. I was originally going to have 20 speakers, but I've added a few extra. And so tomorrow we're going to have Ariel Ford, and she's going to be talking all about relationships, love, and the soulmate connection. Now, she didn't really feel comfortable advising parents because she is not a parent herself, but all of the things that she's talking about can be applied to relationships with your children, and also is information that you can turn around and give to your kids so that they can have healthy, fulfilling relationships too as they get older. So I'm really looking forward to that tomorrow. So be sure to join us for that. And remember, the interviews are available for 48 hours for your listening pleasure. And after that, they become part of the upgrade package. And if you're interested in owning the recordings, adding them to your own personal library, you can visit our upgrade page. We have links on the website and in the emails. And you can purchase the upgrade package, download all of the recordings, and then you'll also get some bonuses that some of our speakers have donated to the upgrade package. So some really cool stuff, and I hope that you'll consider adding these interviews to your library. They've just been really amazing, and I know that you'll want to listen to them a few times just to really get like all of that really great information out of them. So looking forward till tomorrow. Talk to you then. Bye bye.